Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today in this video, I am going to talk about the Freestyle Chess Paris Grand Slam. This is a tournament where all the players play in Fisher Random. This is a top event where the world's strongest chess players are participating in, including Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, and many more. There are 12 players in total, 11 of them are invited, and this one remaining spot is for the winner of the play-in. And today in this video, our main character is none other than the amazing Super Grandmaster from India, Vidit Gujrathi, who has just won the play-in and earned this last spot for the Paris Grand Slam. He has been killing it in the 2025 Paris Freestyle Chess Grand Slam, the play-ins. This tournament is actually a huge deal with a prize pool of $750,000. It's attracting top-notch players, big names like world champion Gukesh Damaraju, Magnus Carlsen. As I've said, these players, they are already being invited, and Vidit had to compete with a bunch of other skilled players as well, including the former World Test Champion, Liren. Also, there's Amin Tabatabaei, Richard Rappert, and also many more skilled players for this last spot in the Paris finals. And here's the craziest part. Vidit he didn't practice for the last 3 to 4 months. He said this during the interview, and he was busy with other stuff. But you know what? He still managed to perform incredibly well in the play-in. It's like he's some kind of chess wizard. You don't need to practice. Sorry, my voice is a little bit cracky, but you don't even need to practice. You just still perform extremely well at your best form. The matches were, of course, intense. For example, in round 16, where he faced Dean Liren, and they shared the same birthday, actually. This is another backstory. But Vidit, he was on fire and dominated that game. Then in the quarterfinals, he took on Pranish, I don't know his full name, but his name is always on chess.com, Pranish M. And Pranish had just eliminated a top ranked player, but Vidit, he wasn't phased and secured the win at the very end and qualified into the semi-finals against Amin Tabatabaei, who is also a really strong grandmaster. And already his opponent Amin Tabatabaei was in great form, but still Vidit won both games easily. And in the finals, he faced against Richard Rappert, started with some creative moves, but Vidit seized the opportunity at the very end, maintained his advantage, and qualified for the Paris event. It's definitely not an easy, the whole the whole story, all of these games that he had played, definitely they were not easy. But at the very end, he won this whole play-in and qualified in. On top of that, he also won a $10,000 prize money, and that is really nice. Vidit also said he was worried at first because he wasn't prepared at all, but he found that the freestyle format suited him well because don't need to prepare for any openings or anything. And even when he had traveled for 10 hours and was playing on mobile data, and even without any Wi-Fi or something, it didn't stop him though. He also thought that taking a break might just be even from the exhausting chess schedule last year actually helped him perform better this time because he was just playing completely fresh and without any exhaustion or anything. Vidit Gujrathi is just too good at chess. His skills are off the charts. Now, let's check out some of his crazy, amazing games from this tournament and see his masterful moves up close. And today in this video, I've actually prepared 2 games for you guys. But before that, I'm going to quickly introduce this tournament to you guys. Well, the Freestyle Chess Paris Grand Slam is the second of 5 events of the multi-million-dollar Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour. And here are the players. Each Grand Slam features 10 participants. The top 3 of the previous Grand Slam, the top 3 by classical rating, 2 organizer wildcards, the winner of the major classical tournament, and the winner of Chess.com's play-ins. And as you can see, these are the players invited. We have Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Arjun Nurigisi, Gukesh Damaraju, Alireza Firouzja, Vincent Keimer, Prananda Ramesh Babu, Hans Niemann, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Lana Popuniachi, and here we have Vidit Gujrathi. So the schedule is basically like this, and from April 7th to April 14th, it will be the Grand Slam round robin and the knockout held in Paris. For the Grand Slam round robin, April 7 to 8, the top 8 players from the Grand Slam round robin advance to the knockout. But before that, 12 players will compete in a round robin. Players ranked 1st through 4th can, in order, pick among players ranked from 5th through 8th as their opponent in the knockout. The player ranked in 9th picks among players ranked from 11th and 12th as their opponent. Players contest a single elimination bracket with the winner of each match playing for 9th and 10th places and the loser of each match tying for 11th and 12th. The time control is 10 minutes with a 10-second increment each move. And this is the prize money we have. It's a huge prize pool, and definitely competition is really strong, as you can see by looking at the participants. All of them are extremely strong. So still it is unpredictable who will win. All right, so this is basically this tournament, some of the details of it, and now let's jump into the games where Vidit just played really excellent chess, even though he hasn't practiced for 3 to 4 months. In this first game, he is facing against former World Chess Champion Dean Liren with the black pieces. So here he has the black pieces, and this is Fischer random chess. As you have noticed, all of the back rank pieces are misordered. So basically, both sides have a bishop, 2 bishops, who are opposite colored, and the king has to be between the rooks, and then all of the other pieces, they can just be placed randomly. And first of all, usually at first sight, when we take a look at these kinds of positions, we try to take a look at the order of the pieces. Especially as we can see here, we see that the rook and the queen are on the files. And this definitely just means that, well, normally in general, you are going to push your pawns on the on the king side, that is. But in the game, however, Dean Liren instead starts with b4. Well, the idea is to open up the bishop and then immediately start putting some pressure on the diagonal. And Vidit here responds with the move b6. Well, of course, b6 is actually a really logical move, but you can also try to play mirror chess and play b5 as well, just to copy white. But b6 here is, of course, a pretty nice move. And in the game, we have h4, pushing the pawn forward, knight f6, developing the knight, f3. So the pawn is trying to control the squares that this knight might be able to jump to and trying to dominate the knight. And here we have g6. Well, g6 is actually also the best move in this position. And I mean, both sides right now, they are playing extremely well and accurate. We have e4 in the game, pushing the pawn forward and creating a very solid pawn chain, which is blockading this bishop. And right now, both sides are doing pretty good. In the game, we have d6 played, preventing e5. And in the game, we have d4, pushing the pawn, and white is building up this big white center. Now in the game, we have bishop g7. Black is developing the bishop, playing really, really solid. As you can see, all of his pieces, the highest, they're just on the 6th rank and not even further. Pretty solid for Vidit so far. And here in the game, Dean started to make a mistake. Well, of course, in Fischer random chess, it's really hard to decipher if it's really a mistake or not, because there's no opening rules or anything, and unless you just simply blunder a piece, it's not that easy to determine if this move is a blunder or a mistake or not. In the game, Dean here played 92, but this is a move that is definitely not in the computer's suggestion. And what white should have played instead is actually just to develop the bishop, and this knight might have been better to develop this way with knight b3. And also the idea is very clear. I mean, if you play knight e2 immediately as played in the game, well here knight e2 as played in the game, then you'll find a problem that this just simply blockades the bishop and makes it somehow a little bit more difficult for white to develop. In the game, Vidit plays h5, so first of all, he is fixing the pawn structure on the king side and preventing any h5 breakthroughs for white. And in the game, we have knight d3, but as you can see, this bishop is in huge trouble, blockaded by all of its own pieces. In the game, we have b5, played by Vidit, fixing the pawn structure, but also creating more space for this knight to jump to the c4 square. And in the game, we have g3, but already at this point, Ding is kind of struggling because his pieces are just misplaced. He is playing towards the wrong direction, and in the game, Vidit just followed his idea and placed knight b6, aiming to jump to this c4 square, which is really strong. In the game, we have bishop h3, very logical, developing the bishop to this open diagonal. The knight jumps to c4, also very logical here. And just so you guys know that in Fischer random chess, both sides can also castle, but it's more tricky because here if you castle, you have to realize that if you go short castle as played in the game, there is a problem. As you can see, you castle this way, and here you can actually also go long castle, but definitely the king is quite dangerous if you go long castle. But in the game, with only 3 minutes left on the clock, Ding actually spent a lot of time thinking in the first few moves. Here, he made a mistake by playing short castle. And why is this a mistake? Well, after you've castled, you just suddenly realize that there is this knight d2 thing, forking both of the rooks. And actually, knight d2, black is just suddenly up material, and it's really hard for white to recover. In the game, Ding has to play like something queen g2, but then he loses material. Vidit took on b1, and after rook takes b1, now Vidit decides to get his king to safety. We have knight f4. Now, what basically black needs to do is to activate all of his pieces. As you can see, this h8 queen is not doing that good right now because it is being blocked by its own pieces. In the game, e6 was first played, very logical, to blockade the diagonal of the light square bishop. And in the game, we have queen f2, rook b e8. So here we have rook e1. But already, black, first of all, is up material, but now a6, first of all, defending the pawn, but maybe 97 is slightly better. This is a clear idea for black to get this knight to c4 and also opening up this diagonal for the bishop and the queen to pressure the d4 pawn. So in the game, however, a6 was instead played, which is also very logical. You're trying to, support your b5 pawn and just playing smoothly, slowly. In the game, we have a3, and white is basically playing mirror chess without anything to do. Bishop b7, first of all, getting the bishop to where it should be, and the position is closer and closer towards a very normal game. Bishop b2, Ding is doing the same. Knight d7, the knight reroutes back to d7, and then the idea obviously is to go knight b6, knight c4. And in the game, we have e5, pushing the pawn further, but the negative idea, or like the cons of this move, is that it blockades its own bishop, even though it does blockade the bishop and the queen as well, but it is being pressured by the opponent's pieces, and also it opens up this diagonal for the bishop. Now in the game, Vidit plays knight b6, following his plan. Right now, Vidit is just playing extremely well without any mistakes. Huge mistakes, that is. And in the game, Ding decides to go for counterplay on the king side with g4, but simply Vidit just tooks on it, take it, and after bishop takes g4, another mistake. Well, definitely here you should take with a pawn, even though it looks kind of unpromising, because it's opened up this diagonal, but this is the only way that white can still play on. And in the game, after taking with the bishop, now you'll just realize that first of all, white's pawn structure is damaged, and also this h4 pawn is extremely weak, everything is just sort of falling apart. And as you can see, Vidit plays extremely well. First of all, knight c4, bishop c3, queen h6, and queen g3. Well, here actually for Black's idea is trying, to first of all, let's say, play something like rook d8, and then threaten you to take to open up the d file, that is, and pressure everything like the e5 pawn and something. But in the game, I think Vidit, he had an idea. He played, oops, sorry, spoiler alert, I clicked a little bit too fast. But here he played the move bishop c8. Now this is a move that is not completely like giving the advantage back or something, but now giving at least white some chances to defend. Now in the game, white should have played bishop h3 here, to retreat the bishop back and try to go for something like, like knight f2, knight g4 to get this knight to g4 instead. This is white's best plan here, but instead in the game, well, I guess this is a plan that is really hard to see. And instead in the game, h5 was played, but simply now Black has a winning advantage once again after playing this g5 move. And after g5, closing up the king side, the position is just way too hard for white to play with material down. And after knight h3, f5, Black is now forcing white to take en passant, e takes f6, but now this is just simply over because after knight df2, white is trying to reroute the knights, but then queen g7 with very accurate play. Well, here actually for Black, in the game, Vidit didn't play the best move. He played e5, but instead he should have first of all played c5 or something to open up more dark square diagonals. And of course, because white cannot take, the bishop is losing on c3, white can only take back with the b pawn, but then after takes, this d4 pawn is gonna fall because there's not enough pieces for white to defend it. And in the game, however, e5 was instead played, which made the winning job slightly harder. But in the game, Ding also missed the chance. If he had played bishop c8 after rook takes c8 and then placed knight g4, maybe white still have some holding chances because this knight is extremely strong and Black can find it really hard to get rid of it. And the knight can also control many squares, put some pressure towards Black. But in the game, however, with only 31 seconds left on the clock, Ding missed this opportunity and played a d5. But now, Vidit just simply plays knight b6. After bishop takes, rook takes, but now if you play knight g4, it is too late because the d5 pawn is hanging, that's for sure. And in the game, bishop d2 was played. White is trying to go for this losing g5 pawn, but simply Vidit ignores it and played knight d5. And after bishop takes, a couple of exchanges, but simply Black is able to hold it, and Black is also material up, and then at the very end, Black is just simply winning. Vidit won this game after this rook g7 move, and then qualifies into the next stage. He eventually won in the semifinals, in the quarterfinals, and now he reached the finals. But in the final, he faced Richard Reppert. In today's video, I'm not going to show you guys the game between him and Richard, but instead I'm going to show you guys the game that he has played between Amin, against Amin Tabatabaei, who is also a really strong grandmaster. Now here, as we can see, he is again with the black pieces, and now let's take a look at this position. Well, the bishops are together, all eyeing towards the king side, that is, but the kings are somehow more towards the queen side, and the position, well, you see that the rooks, the queen, they are not together, so I mean, you can play on both sides. And in the game, Amin Tabatabaei here, he starts with e4, very logical, and we have e5, again, copy chess, c3, and f5. Well, although here c6 would have been the best option to keep on copying like what white is doing, that is completely fine for black, but in the game f5 was played, which is more aggressive. And in the game here, white took on f5, but you may at first sight seem that this is like black is giving up a pawn, but black can win it immediately back by playing d5 and winning it immediately back. In the game, knight gf3 was played, and this is already a mistake. What white should have played is trying to create a bigger space in the center by playing d4. Now, if black plays e4, there's g4 now to defend. And if black takes on d4, then after takes, bishop takes f5, you can simply ignore the trade and play knight d3. But in the game, however, instead of playing d4 here, well, I mean, you can also even play g4 if you want to defend the pawn. But instead, in the game, white decides to play knight gf3, simply attacking the e5 pawn here. But in the game, c5 was played. Now black is having a big black center, but also opening up this diagonal for the bishop right on time to defend the e5 pawn and still threatening to take the f5 pawn. Now, in the game, we have d4, but the wrong move order. White should have played d4 immediately instead of playing knight gf3 first. Now, the best move and the only move for white to stay better is to play queen e2 here, to keep on putting pressure on this e5 pawn. And if black ever tries to push the pawn, there's knight g5, and of course you cannot take on f5, because then after d3, a couple of very complicated variations. But at the very end, if you take, there's now knight takes d3, white sacrifices a pawn. Well, actually, no, white didn't sacrifice a pawn, but white is now in the lead of development, as you can see, and basically, white is much better here. In the game, however, instead of playing queen e2, Amin here decides to play d4. But simply, this just allows black to play e4. Unfortunately, in the game, Vidit missed this e4 opportunity to stay better immediately. Instead, he played c takes d4, which is the second best move, but not as great as e4. And in the game, we have c takes b4 and then e4, but now there's bishop g5 check, knight gf6 block. But it's better to block with this e8 knight, because now after knight e5, for example, you can play something like queen e8. This knight is better on e7, and then you can go to, for example, c6 or something. And also, you're still threatening for black. You're still threatening to take on f5. But in the game, knight gf6 was instead played. And now after knight e5, you no longer have queen e8 ideas to gain control of these light squares. In the game, we have queen e7 instead. But now, Amin here, he just played this really nice move. He played f4. And in the game, Vidit took on f5. And after knight c2, a couple of really nice moves by white. The material is still equal, but even though black has this scary looking pass pawn on e4, but basically on the very next move, white will be able to play knight e3 to use the knight to blockade the pass pawn and gain control, attack the pieces. So it's actually a really nice idea by white. In the game, although Vidit, he also played extremely well, and he played knight d6, developing his pieces. After knight e3, he played short castle. Now, getting the king to safety is very logical. In the game, what white should have done instead is also to get the king to safety by playing either queen e2 or queen f2. But instead, in the game, here he actually just wasted a few moves, and he first of all played a3, which is kind of unnecessary, because at this point, development and the king's safety are the most important things. In the game, bishop e6 was played, missing the opportunity to play, well, here it's pretty good for black to play h6, forcing a trade, because if you go back to h4, now that after black runs away from this pin, and then also threatens to go queen a4 check to threaten the d4 pawn as well. Here, let's say queen e2 happens, but there's queen a4, and after king e1, well, for black cannot take right now because there's some bishop a2 rook d1 ideas to win the d5 pawn back, but it's better for black to first of all just develop with bishop c7 and keep on threatening to check white's king. Now, in the game, however, instead of playing h6, black instead played bishop e6, which is not a really bad move, but not the best. And still, again, what white should have played is to play queen e2 and then go for short castle. But instead, in the game, again, Amin here, he just plays f5. This is a complete blunder. It looks really attractive at first sight because you are like attacking your opponent's pieces and something. But after f5, again, white should have played queen e2 to prepare for short castle, and then maybe f5. White is no need to hurry. But f5 immediately just doesn't seem right, because there are just tactics anywhere, and the rook is eyeing this queen. But unfortunately for Vidit, he didn't find the best tactic to win here, which is to go knight f5, because if you take, here you have this brilliant move, queen e8. This is a really quiet move, but queen a4 is unstoppable, and you have to move your knights away. Like, if you play something like queen e2 here, well, this is even the best move preferred by the engine, giving the piece back to black. And if you play something else like, I don't know, knight back, for example, well, there's just takes, and then queen h5, winning this bishop back. It's game over. But of course, this needs a lot of calculation and courage as well. And in the game, instead, Vidit decides to go for the calmer queen e8 move immediately. His idea is obviously to go queen a4, but now white is just in time to stop it. First of all, white plays f takes e6, and there's no effective discovered attacks. This knight can't really go anywhere to win the material. The only way for black to win material back is to play queen h5. And in the game, we have queen e2, queen g5, and bishop a2 was played in the game. Although white is already winning here after this h4 move, and the queen has to decide where to go. Queen h5, for example, but well, just simply take, and play e7. Also, if the queen goes to h6, let's say, then bishop a2. At least the queen is much more passive on h6 than it is on g5. And already, actually, at this point, Vidit did play a couple of inaccurate moves, and the reason that, and that's the reason why at this point he is completely losing. But again, it's for sure random chess, and anything can happen. There are lots of possibilities, basically, here. And in the game, Amin here, he decides to play bishop a2 first. But again, this is the wrong move order. He is attacking this pawn, but right now, king safety is the most important thing here. In the game, Vidit found the best reply and played knight f5, simply ignoring it. But of course, this knight is right now attacking this d4 pawn, which is also really important for white. White cannot lose it. So in the game, white decides to first of all take on f5, and after queen takes f5, e7. This pawn may seem a little bit scary, but after this rook e8 move, the rook blockades the pawn and threatens to take it on the very next move. Now, in the game here, Amin here, he decides to play rook f1 to threaten the queen. But he should have played g4 first to get this queen away. For example, to e6, and then just keep on pushing. Let's say bishop takes e5, you take back, and then let's say knight d7 back. Get the king to safety. King safety is really important here, and maybe white will have some winning chances because these pawns are extremely weak. But although at this point the computer suggests this is completely equal, but in human eyes, white has a lot of chances. In the game, however, rook f1 was first played, and here we have queen e6, we have queen b5, a couple of inaccuracies by Amin, and then bishop takes e5. Finally, Vidit manages to exchange this really annoying knight for his undeveloped bishop, and then after d takes e5, queen takes e5, black is now up a pawn, white manages to go long castle and threaten this d5 pawn here, but black just gobbles up another pawn, even though giving back the d5 pawn, but after bishop takes d5, the king simply runs away, king h8, and here the queen is pinning the bishop and the queen, and white's king is still on the open files here, and we have bishop c4, offering a trade of queens, but already at this point, black is up a very healthy pawn, and it is a very strong e-passed pawn, like e-pawn. Black is already having a winning advantage here, but still needs really accurate play. In the game here, Vidit, with accurate play, he took another pawn on h2 and threatens to take on g2 on the next move, and also just simply pushing the e-pawn down the board. In the game, king b1 was played, but queen e5 back now. Black is up 2 pawns and is completely fine for black to trade the queens off. Now, Amin here, he decides to retreat the queen back, and he didn't want to trade the queens anymore, because if you trade the queens off, then there will be no more chances to create some counterplay. e3, pushing the pawn, threatening e2, rook e1, h6, and, opening up a path for the king in case there are some back rank problems. and king a1 was played. Here, white only has 6 minutes left on the clock, while Vidit still has 54 seconds. This also shows that he has a great control of his time. In the game, he played knight g4, defending the e3 pawn, bishop e2, trying to blockade the pawn, but the knight jumps into f2 and attacks the rook to d5, queen f6, not the most accurate play, but, good enough. Bishop f3, rook a e8, developing the very last piece on the board, defending the pawn, rook e2, knight h1, and then a couple of maneuvers, everything is really normal. And then here, rook takes e7, because if you take on g4, then white will be winning now, because after takes with check, and then you lose this knight, and suddenly the position is turned over, white is winning. But of course, Vidit won't fall for these kinds of silly tricks, and instead he played rook e7, just simply taking the piece, queen c4, g6, and after queen c3, the king defends the f6 knight. Rook f1, trying to get a little bit cheeky by, using the rook and the queen to pressure this knight. But Vidit played it really calmly. He played queen d6, and then after bishop e2, queen e5, another queen trade. Queen b4 was played, ignoring this trade, and then both sides actually just moving back and forth, and Vidit is slowly improving his position. And at the very end here, up 2 pawns, there's no way for black to lose this position. And then after a couple of moves here, after this queen e5 move, Amin Tabatabaei, he kind of froze, or because it's really hard for him to play a single move here. Everything just doesn't seem right, and he unfortunately lost on time. But this also means that Vidit won this game, this very important game, and then he qualifies into the final facing against Richard Rapper, and he also won the finals, and this means that he has he gained the spot to play in the Freestyle Chess Paris Grand Slam. He hasn't practiced for in the last 3 to 4 months, but still he is playing extremely well. He showed great technique, also his great control of his time usage. And even though he is facing really strong players who are also practicing all day long, at least he is playing against players who have been practicing in the last 3 to 4 months, where he actually didn't. And also, he just got married recently, which is also really a great news. And actually, in the interview, in the news, he also said that he is going to Paris for his honeymoon, all of the ideas. Really nice for him. But again, he's just like a chess wizard with no practice in the last 3 to 4 months. Still amazing chess is on the board. Yeah, well, I just hope that he can also play extremely well in the Paris Grand Slam as well. Alright. So, hope you guys enjoyed these 2 games as well as this video, and just see how strong he is, a chess wizard. And please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!